Coming to you from beyond the final frontier, it's Archaeodeath.
Welcome everybody to our latest Department of History and Archaeology Research Seminar. But the conversation today is going to be a bit different because rather than having a presentation, we are having a conversation between myself and our guest, Dr. Ellie Mackin Roberts. And Ellie is a lecturer in classical art and archaeology at King's College London and is an eminent scholar who has produced a whole series of work on ancient Greek religion, material culture and visual culture. She'll be able to talk about that, so I won't do any more exhausting and cringeworthy introduction. But hello, Ellie, nice to see you.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And I mean, this is what my colleagues have been talking about a lot is different modes of digital public engagement. And I wanted an opportunity to talk with you about your experience as someone who's really at the sort of a trailblazer in multiple regards in this regard. I know that's not just about TikTok. I know you've been working on this in many other venues, and I hope we can provide that as context. But if I may just say as a word of introduction, I want you to lead on a lot of this, so but I won't leave you alone because I hopefully we can have sort of a chat about various things. But I thought I suppose my thinking about why to have this now within this research seminar series is because so many of my colleagues across disciplines at the University of Chester have been discussing using social media. Others don't at all. But particularly in the pandemic, I started using TikTok. I can't remember. I don't know exactly when you did, but the pandemic's part of this, but it's also part of a broader both opportunity and challenge of how do we communicate our expertise to audiences beyond the academy via digital media. And I'm like you, I've had various feelings of optimism and pessimism with other social media channels, and TikTok at least seems to be getting interaction. So that's why I thought we could focus on TikTok. But I wondered if you could give me your sense of the backstory of how you got into doing any of this social media work, and what's so good or different about TikTok, do you feel?
Well, I also started doing TikTok in the middle of the pandemic. I had been playing a lot of Hades, the video game. I'm writing a book about Hades, and it forms one of the case studies for classical reception. And so I really just sort of started kind of getting into reading about what people were saying about the game, first on Reddit, and then that sort of led me to TikTok, where I then made a couple of videos about different aspects of Hades the game, having written an academic monograph on underworld gods in ancient Greek religion and the cultural landscape. And it just kind of went from there. I just kind of really enjoyed this short form, really sort of rapid fire way of engaging different publics. I know that different sorts of history and archaeology have different sorts of reputations. And I work in a classics department. I have 3 classics degrees. Classics is an exceptionally elitist and gatekeepy discipline. And that a lot of that is changing. And I feel really aware of the fact that because I work in a field that's very elitist, that's very kind of has this reputation, and in a department which is one of the top classics departments in the country,
yes.
Which is very focused on engaging traditionally underrepresented students. I didn't kind of feel like the work that was being done on Twitter and those sorts of other social media sites was actually kind of cutting through to the people that we want to be engaging with, which is not only students from traditionally underrepresented backgrounds, which obviously is about the health of the discipline and all of that sort of stuff, but also just a general public who are engaged in the ancient world, in archaeology, in ancient history, and tend to be actually very receptive to learning about new research. that, you know, it can be very easy to think that you must find this as well, Howard, with the Vikings, that people think because they've watched, you know, in my case, Mary Beard or Michael Scott and the BBC, that all of these things are settled.
Yes.
And I think they get very excited about learning that a lot of these debates aren't settled and they are ongoing, and there is new material and new evidence coming out, and new ways of approaching that evidence. And I think that gets people really excited, and that kind of is what kept me on TikTok, that engagement that I was getting from like normal people that I never would have reached otherwise.
I mean, I felt that too, that a lot of other social media activities, I mean, I have presence on other social media platforms, but I did my blog from 2013, so coming up to 9.5 years of blogging, and then sharing that through Facebook and Twitter mainly, although I've had various stop starts with Instagram, and I tried Tumblr, and it was a desert for me. I couldn't find anything, and I haven't done anything on Reddit or anything like. I haven't even engaged on that, but you know, we have our different platforms, but I found there was all I got was grief from certain other platforms, or people who already know the stuff and are agreeing with me. And while there are general publics out there, I think there's a good 20-30 people on Twitter who are not academics, professionals, who interact at some point. TikTok was very quickly a different world. I found the nature of the algorithm, while a curse, and we curse it all the time about how some things go, you know, far, and other things we put a lot of effort into just disappear into nowhere. It's incredibly frustrating, but people are liking and commenting and asking genuine questions. And yes, the general public context means you are dealing with some very crazy ideas, some quite dangerous and pernicious ideas at some points, but there's a lot of people who are genuinely informed at different degrees, who are asking questions. And yeah, I find it really constructive in that sense. I mean, could you give perhaps some of the people who, you know, are watching this, who have never done anything on, in terms of video social media, what you do, just give us an introduction to what the practicalities of what kinds of videos you record, because a lot of people dance and lip sync and do all sorts of crazy things. You're much more, you know, talking to camera. What's your style?
So I suppose I have kind of 3 different ways that I approach making videos. The first and I script most of my videos and then have them on a teleprompter. So I use a teleprompter app. I don't always stick to the script, but you know, it helps to kind of keep on track and to limit the amount of editing that I then have to do. Right. So I kind of come up with ideas in 3 sort of different ways. The first are when I'm doing teaching prep and come across like interesting case studies, or after classes, if my students have particularly engaged with like a pot or a piece of sculpture, that I might then go and kind of make a more extended, you know, analysis of that one object. The other kind of type is where a similar sort of thing, but in my own research, when I kind of come across things that I get really excited about or whatever, and I will kind of make a video about that. And that can happen at different points of the research process, either really early on or actually very late, you know, in the kind of editing, and when I think, oh, actually, this might make a really nice video. And the other one is sort of responses, whether that's responses to comments or other people's videos, or just like, you know, one of my students or someone has kind of said to me, hey, I'm really interested in this, you know, maybe you can make a video about it. And then very recently, I kind of did a couple of videos, only one of which I've actually posted as of yet, about my actual research process. Yes. So I posted a video of going to see the sculptures in the British Museum that I had identified on a plan for a publication that I'm working on, or a manuscript, I should say, that I'm working on. So yeah, they're sort of the main types, and mainly I do script my videos. I think it helps me to be more precise and more succinct, to do it that way. I know that not everybody does. And it also cuts down on the time that I spend recording and re-recording. And like you, Howard, I do this in addition to my full-time workload. Like, this is not accounted for in my workload model.
No, of course not.
So, anything that I can do to kind of replicate work, so with teaching prep or with research into TikTok, or to kind of cut down the amount of time that I have to spend on recording or editing, doing all the captions and all that sort of stuff.
It is a time-consuming process, isn't it? I kind of guessed you did some kind of teleprompting, because you're really fast and articulate and clear in a way that only a few people are on. And I go, God, that's so good. How did you pack so much in? And I kind of guessed you had you put a lot of time. It's a lot of, people need to know this. It's a lot of time. And while I don't do that, there have been hours that have gone by where a video has suddenly been uploading and disappeared off my phone. There's been some tech issue, and it just hasn't even saved to drafts. And you sort of, crying into a cup of tea or whatever other drink is available. So there's all manner of technical issues. But it's time of thinking through, planning what you want to do content about, how are you going to do it, and you've also, if I can add to the things you've said about you, I don't know if you've done it recently, you've done walk and talks as well, haven't you? You've done sort of out and about, less formal content where you're reflecting on things.
Yeah, so I used to do a lot more of that, particularly last year. I was only working part-time. I had coming back off maternity leave, I decided not to go full-time in that first year. And so I used to do a lot of kind of on the fly, as I was walking around the park with my daughter in the pram and stuff like that. And I don't do as much of that now because I just don't have as much time during the day walking around the park as I used to. But I've also, I think, I do a lot more, well, not a lot, but much more than I used to, kind of off-brand content, particularly around things like the UCU strikes and other kind of political things going on, because I don't feel that I can divorce my identity, my political views, from my identity as an educator, and as a person who kind of lives within UKHE, and as an immigrant who has decided to make the UK my home. And those things, I think, inform my academic practice in a way that I can't kind of divorce from.
I think that's really important.
I do a bit more of that.
I think that's really important, though, isn't it? And I think I've heard from other creators that they like, if you're doing like 100 videos over 200 days or 150 days that are just straight up, let's talk about this issue, they do like to see something of the behind the scenes. They like to know something about you. You don't have, obviously we have to be very careful about how much we talk about our personal lives, and that's our own decisions about how we frame that. But my point is, I think our audience generally do like some sense of, okay, I'm going into work now and I'm going to be teaching this, and by the way, I'm working on, here's a site I'm visiting on a day off, but you're much more formal than I am. I'm very eclectic, I'm all over the show, but equally I think there is an appeal to that. And I think whether it's political or social, or I'm going to start, and I've seen other creators do this whole, okay, okay guys, I'm stepping outside of my usual content and I'll now be talking about this piece of 19th century architecture I happen to see because this actually is really relevant to something else I'm interested in. And so I don't think that's the end of the world. I think that's good, actually, but I know what you mean. Some people are perhaps really straight up and they don't include any of that, and it's just, I'm going to now talk about another. But you've also done some wonderful series, and your Advent series on Greek pottery, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, because you're dealing with material culture, you're dealing with art, and you had a pot per day, wasn't it, for like how many?
Yes, so I did 24 from the 1st to the 24th. Every day spoke about a pot, except for one day in which I spoke about black groundware, which is essentially like all pots that aren't decorated, like normal everyday pots that tend to just be black slipped. and are just the regular pots that people have in their homes. And they, I don't think, get enough love because everybody wants to see like the big, flashy, painted, Panathenaic prize amphorae. That was, I wish I had planned that series slightly better. And I think I will do something similar again, and make it much more planned in advance, because I knew pretty much all the pots that I wanted to talk about roughly, but I was sort of making them only a day in advance. And I kind of wish that I had filmed them all in advance and then wasn't kind of on Christmas Eve in my parents-in-law's, living room, like filming about a pot. But I really enjoyed doing that series. I really love, coming from a very hard classics background, and working in a classics department now. And I used to work in the archaeology department at the University of Leicester. So I kind of have that more grounded archaeology department kind of dirty experience, if I kind of may say, you know what I mean.
Yes.
And I really struggle sometimes to articulate my identity as a ancient historian who works on material culture and is predominantly about material culture in my research and definitely in my teaching, with kind of the classics part of that. And I think that's also one of the reasons that TikTok is great, because, you can do, here's one thing, one pot, it's incredible, and this is why, and come back tomorrow and I'll talk to you about another pot. So yeah.
So in 1 to 3 minutes, we can go longer, up to 10 minutes for people who don't know, but most people go for 1 to 3 minutes. I think a lot of people feel frozen by fear. They've got to try and pack everything in. But if you create a series, which you can link to a playlist, or you just simply say, well, here's an example, and here's 7 books. You've also do these wonderful, like, here's 18 books. I love those where you do sort of, here's 5 books that are on this. And you also, and also I love the ones where you went to the Parthenon itself, didn't you? You actually went to Athens and you took us around, one of the things I wanted to ask about that is, because I've tried to do, like, I do a lot of site visit ones, but no one cares. I can literally show evidence of the first ever, whatever it may be, pyramid, or the most unique ever medieval castle, and everyone, it's a really low interaction, because they like it's seeing you doing it is what people like. What was your reaction to the different styles you've adopted? What works and what hasn't worked in terms of being out and about versus in a museum versus but with a bookcase?
I think that in general, the ones that do the worst for me are the ones in museums.
Right, that's interesting.
Which, I don't know, like, sometimes I get really frustrated because they seem to do really well for other people.
Yeah, and people sort of saying, hey, an object, and see, that's it, and they get millions of views, or
and you're like, but when I was in Athens a year and a half ago, I was on a research trip, and it was a really frustrating experience because I had this money to go on this research trip. I couldn't because of the pandemic. Suddenly I could. I had to take my infant because otherwise I couldn't go. So I had to cut down a lot of what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And so I decided to make these sort of on-site videos. And I really just did them on the fly. I didn't plan them at all. They were just like, oh yeah, this is a thing that I'm kind of have just read the plaque on, and here we go. Or, particularly things around like the tholos and stuff in the amphora, not the amphora, the agora, which actually in hindsight, that makes a terrible video because there's nothing there. Like, there's a mark on the ground that if you know what you're looking at, you know what it is, but otherwise, but I'm actually going back to Athens next year, not on a research trip, but I will be doing some sneaky research on the side, but on a holiday. And am going to do some of those videos again in a much more kind of planned and thoughtful way. And so I think it'll be interesting to see the difference between these kind of ad hoc videos and the planned videos and how well they do. But I do think the ones that do the best are the ones where I'm standing in front of the bookcase in the office and, you know, just putting up pictures of things. Also, I think because when you video stuff in a museum, even on site, the image is not as good as if you download a high res image from the museum website or whatever and put it in the background. So I think it's also about like how people see the images.
I think a lot, unless you're doing one of these, unless you've got those professional setups, which, you know, you actually can produce like quality, you know, visuals of sites, which I don't. I mean, I'm just so enthusiastic when I go to a site and I want to go, oh God, look, ridge and furrow, folks, and you sort of empty you know, everyone else is just going, see a field, Howard, or hill fort, it's just amazing, look at this, and everyone's just going, it's just a bump, you know. No, I
love your videos when you're out and about and you're like, here's a dike. I think those are great.
But you know what I mean, in the sense that I don't think many of these sites look as good as in my mind and on the ground they are. They on the camera they're not going to translate in the way, and the, you know, I always feel the sense of, you know, well, for me it was cool, but obviously everyone, but I have that on student field trips sometimes as well. Many a student field trip I've gone, look at this, everyone, and they go, oh, well. But you know, I think that's the problem of sites, and unless you've got that ability to, which I don't have, of capturing high quality visuals, and because it's not landscape view, you've got a portrait style of TikTok video or reels, or all these are a portrait, you're not going to be able to capture a landscape in a monument. But anyway, I was just interested in that. And I was wondering also about how, in terms of the different styles of video you've tried, has anything gone better than you thought, or anything flopped in a way that really annoyed you in terms of, you know, your expectations?
I think the videos that I know will do well are videos where I talk about Greek mythology. Right. And that frustrates me because that's kind of the least interesting part of what I do, I think. But it also brings a bigger audience in, and you know, so sometimes you have to make those trade-offs for things that you are pretty sure are going to do well. Videos where I talk about Hades and Persephone always either go really well with really high engagement or nothing. And I don't understand why one goes well and one doesn't.
No.
You know, sometimes I get really frustrated by how poorly videos about sculpture do in comparison to pots.
I would have thought it'd be the other way around.
Yeah, I kind of did too, but all like generally across the board, sculpture does worse than pots.
Do you think it's because people, do you think, I mean, I'm interested, I just thought of this, I haven't really planned question at all, but I wonder whether a lot of it is TikTok is a bit subversive in that people know what is the classic standard content, and they're attracted to the things they know are a little humble, a little less glitzy, a little less standard. Do you think that's true, or is that me just being hopeful that people get that?
I don't know. I mean, it's certainly an interesting. I think something about the way that the images translate, like black and red figure imagery is very easy to see on a screen, even if the image is not. But like the subtleties of a damaged sculpture are sometimes not as easy, like they don't translate as well onto the screen. And again, you know, this comes back to like, what can you do with the camera on an iPhone, right? And so that's sometimes a bit frustrating.
But then the other thing is, we talked about visuals and objects a lot, but I think before we go on to sort of perhaps the next section of discussing positives and real negatives, you actually pack in some really complex conceptual material, academic ideas, and I think that's important for viewers to appreciate. Is that when I watch your videos, you do the here's an object and it dates to the 5th century BCE and it does this and it's from here and this would have been used in this context. But you're also doing sort of how do we understand society, how do we understand sexuality, how do we understand religion, and how do we understand ritual practice? Or I'm putting those ideas but those are kind. You do. Do you find that stuff puts people off, or because I don't get a sense that's true? I think people are lapping up the more nuanced, complex takes.
I absolutely think that people want more nuanced takes. And I think that that's evident by, like, I don't know what your metrics are like, but my 2 to 3 minute videos tend to do better than my 1 to 2 minute videos, because you can kind of put more in. And I tend to go wide to small. So, always start with like, this is what this is when it's from, this is what it shows. And here's a whole pile of interesting stuff about it and how it relates to other things. And then perhaps, I'm going to link a video that talks about a different aspect of this. And that's one of the great things about TikTok over something like Instagram Reels, is that you can link videos together by either playlists or by actually linking the video in the description to give people more context about things. And they definitely want it. And these are not like an academic audience. This is a general lay audience, and they absolutely want detail and nuance and academic ideas. I very rarely get pushback about how complex things are. Sometimes I get like, what does this word mean? But in good faith.
As long as I think with the proviso that we're not deliberately creating jargon, we're using common language that people can understand. And I do get comments that people have watched the first 5 seconds. I've said, were the Vikings really all evil? And someone's going, yes, no, because they've literally heard I haven't used a video saying that, but something really silly. And then I've explained. Most people and obviously there are going to be people who are not going to understand the framings of anything, but a lot of people are really tackling. They understand the debates. They understand issues about social justice, about race, equality. They're interested in that nuance about sexuality, identity. They're not there just to hear their own opinions pushed back on them. They are obviously, there are topics that are going to attract attention, and identity politics and identity issues are going to be, but often in a constructive way. And yes, you will get occasional lunatics, but a lot of the time I'm finding a lot of that material is reaching people and challenging people. And so I think there's a lot of positive about that. But I also wonder, though, there are videos where I think people latch onto a section of one sentence, not even a full sentence, and they're fixating over that. And obviously that's it could be a failing of me, that I've made a mistake and they're all obsessed with that rather than the actual narrative. But sometimes it's unpredictable, isn't it? So I mean, in terms of the broader, then you've been doing this for 2.5 years now.
Around that. So
what would you say are the takeaway positives of being a TikToker? If that, oh God, did I use that phrase? I used the
TikToker,
there you go, I've done it now.
I mean, broadly, as we've sort of already discussed, I think the biggest positive from my perspective is being able to directly engage with an audience that would never normally see my work, see my research, and in a lot of cases would never normally be exposed to a university level classical art and archaeology idea, concept, something. And particularly, and I don't sort of want to get into the BS of university rankings, but from one of the top classics departments in the country and realistically in the world. We, as our president loves to say, we won the ref in classics.
Won the ref, my word. No comment.
Yeah, indeed. But it is a big deal, and I do get,
That's good, yeah.
I get a lot of DMs and emails from students who want to go into classics, who their schools have no classics or archaeology or pathways into these humanities degrees at GCSE or A level, and being able to kind of give those people something to talk about in their personal statements is really heartening for me as an academic, as someone who cares deeply about my discipline and the health of my discipline, and the health of the humanities more broadly.
Yes,
in UK higher education and global higher education. So that, I think, is the biggest positive for me.
That's really great. I sort of see it in the similar way, in the sense that I'm clearly reaching different audiences, and I think there's a sense of responsibility of public engagement, and also but I also have to say, more selfishly, I find it fun, and I also find it actually it's testing me to address subjects I wouldn't normally address. I address them maybe in a group of students, but I know it's not going anywhere. But to push myself to read the latest articles that I'd probably put on the back. I'll get to that next year when I'm working on that issue. So it's forcing me to engage with my academic discipline in a way that perhaps I'm ashamed to say I sometimes shy away from, but also to trying to communicate. So I'm training on it. So I must admit, I don't know if that's more selfish or more introvert, but certainly more, I'm gaining something from that, as well as I'm sharing some pre-existing stuff I would have done anyway. So I feel it's pushing me in different ways, and which I find positive. But what would you say about more negative or less shiny positive? I don't know how you want to frame it.
I mean, just very quickly to go back to the positives, I do find it fun. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't fun, Negatives. I mean, I think I had become a little bit complacent, I guess, or not complacent, desensitized to some of the more negative aspects. And it wasn't until I was having a conversation with my husband in which I casually mentioned that I have comment moderated both my daughter's names, the road that we live in, and my postcode. And he was like, why would you do that? Like, because if people comment them, it will go through to they won't be posted. And that, his reaction to that did kind of like bring me back to, particularly when I set these up, I'd made a series of videos about the very, very problematic, racist, colonialist past that classics as a discipline has. It ended up on libs of TikTok, and it could have been a lot worse. But as they say, I definitely ended up on the wrong side of TikTok, and have done a couple of times. So that, I guess, is a massive negative. I don't get that bothered by like the mansplaining and the people who come up in my comments and are like, you're wrong about whatever. Or you're not a very good historian, or I'd never take a class with you. And I kind of like, well, if you came and worked in my department, like if you were a student in my department, then you wouldn't have a choice. You'd take classes with me or you'd leave. You don't have to watch my videos. So I have a kind of very purposefully cultivated an attitude of ambivalence towards people who actively don't like me online, and especially on TikTok. I find it much worse on TikTok than on any other social media. So yeah, that is, I guess, the biggest negative.
How does that play out with the there's a blessing of TikTok is also there's a community of creators and the ability to duet and stitch. And I've done that sometimes, but I'm aware it feels a bit intrusive, and I always feel I'm a bit stepping on toes by stitching someone and saying this is a really good point. However, because sometimes I've done some quite robust responses, but I mean, do you engage with any of that, or do you find that just a distraction?
I don't do a lot of stitching and duets. Though I have no problem when people do kind of stitch my things and say, oh, this is a really good point, and also and that is definitely the kind of stitching that I do when I do it. Like trying to positively, add to the community of archaeologists and historians that we have on TikTok. But I don't do a lot of that.
No.
I know that there are amazing creators who kind of that's their bread and butter. But I just,
I've got mine on friends only, so people can't stitch and duet me. They can obviously download the video and do a hand stitch. But I've actually, because I'm a bit nervous about that whole thing, I'm a bit control freaky. I don't mind occasionally responding to others in comments and occasional stitches where I feel comfortable they won't mind. But apart from breaking that mold once or twice where I've got angry at certain extremely obnoxious videos where I felt, because I felt I had to say something, but most of the time it's a very I can't, I don't want to have people just duetting and going, well, he may say this, but I can't deal with the drama of that. So I've got my own controls on that. But inevitably people are going to take umbrage at something I've said and do videos about me, and I've seen accidentally videos about me going, but at the end of the day, I've put myself out there. If people are going to disagree with things, that's fine. But yes, I agree with you. I think that's not the main focus, is it? It's more broadcast, but there is conversation. It's broadcast, but with conversation, because you're responding to what people say. But you can't respond to every comment or react to every crazy person out there, because it will never end. I mean, what are your plans for the future, Ellie? Because you're up to, what are you now? I mean, I don't know how. I don't even know what followers numbers mean anymore, because TikTok is so vast compared with other platforms. But I just checked, you're at 46,000 plus followers, which is like much more. I don't know what your other social media, but that must be many times more than what you and others are followed on by in academic circles on other accounts. I mean, how do you cope with that? That's fame. That is fame, isn't it? I mean,
well, when just after I hit 30,000, someone, I can't remember who it was, said to me, that according to the British government, if you have over 30,000 followers on a single social media channel, you are technically a celebrity. And I was like, that's amazing.
Hey, there you are. It's someone said it. It must be true.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't look into the claim. But it's, I think the algorithm, as you're aware, anybody who's kind of looked at TikTok is aware, is a fickle and harsh mistress. And I have really stopped paying a lot of attention to my views and care more about the actual engagement. So comments, saves, and likes over views. And I make content that I think my students are going to like. I make content that I think, people in my professional circles will like. And I make content that I am passionate about. And I'm lucky enough that having those three things in mind also is what a broader public want to engage with. And I think even if, I've stagnated a little bit. It sort of, I got up to 30,000 very quickly. And then it's been kind of a very low, long, hard slog, I suppose, getting up from there. It's like, would I like to have 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, 1 million followers? Of course I would. That would be amazing. Apart from anything else, that's a ref impact statement that writes itself.
Yeah.
But I'm not that hung up on the number. I just you know, when it stops being fun, when I stop enjoying the engagement with the community, both of academics and of the general public, I'll stop doing it.
That's a really interesting point, because I found that I've people say, well, I've had some good friends say to me about strategy. Yeah, you need to strategize this. And I think if I make it all about strategy of attracting attention, the content will become so clickbaity. I've seen ways I could do it. Some things are outside of my capabilities. I only have a certain sense of humor. I have a certain appearance. There's certain things I can't achieve. A certain singing skills that no one wants to hear. But my point would be that there are things that I could do. I've seen the routes to getting higher figures if I wanted to go down those routes, and I've decided no. So it's also like there's a lot of self-selection, and you have to have integrity with what you want to achieve. So I don't I'm keep thinking about this myself, about the things that I think every time I try and plan something, it doesn't work out in terms of any planning of like, I want to do a video series on this will definitely hit a radar. And I did a series on the archaeology of the Mandalorian Star Wars series, and I enjoyed it. I had integrity, but I knew I could have done that differently, and the views tanked. I had hardly, I mean, it was okay, but it wasn't a hit. Whereas I can do something else that I think will go nowhere, and it's suddenly, oh, everyone's watching. So I think overthinking it is a problem for me. I know I've got the ability to do a slightly different product, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think we've got to have the points you've made, I think, are the key ones, isn't it? Is that, would colleagues be interested? Would students be interested? And I can't remember what the first thing you said, but does it have, is it something you want to do? I think it has to be the bottom line, doesn't it?
And also, I mean, as you say, like, creating content with integrity. Like, none of the things that I put on my TikTok are things that I wouldn't say to my colleagues and my students. Like, I feel that I have a responsibility as an academic who is presenting myself in my professional persona to be true to the evidence that's there, to not over sensationalize. Like, and you could very easily, like, super easily make very sensationalized things. And I know that there are content creators who do that, like Mini Minuteman, who does all those debunking of pseudo archaeology videos, and they're very good, but he's not a professional archaeologist or academic, and I think that makes a big difference. This is fun, it is something I enjoy doing, but it is also something that I do in my professional persona. And so I think, posting with integrity as well is very important.
So in terms of moving forward, you're going to keep doing what you're doing, planning but not over planning, trying to keep that momentum going, because a lot of TikTok is about momentum, isn't it? But you've got no specific plans to start doing tap dancing or or some other style of video. It's more, you've got your style, you've got your content.
I think my base niche is pretty much there. I have started doing a couple more and thinking more about doing like some study skills videos. I made a video this morning about how to email for a letter of reference. Just things that, like, my personal tutees, my undergraduates are coming to me and saying, like, how do I do this thing? And that, new PhD students and research master's students are thinking about, like, how do I get started actually planning my research, or, those sorts of things. But I think that's more about making them and having them up there, and then being able to, when I have a student say, like, what should I do, be like, here, just watch this video, because that's also makes my life easier, and hopefully, it might be. But I'm just going to kind of keep doing stuff based on the classes I'm teaching, and the research that I'm doing, and stuff that I'm interested in, because I think if I plan too far in advance, then I'm not going to want to make the videos that I planned. Something else will come up, or, and I think part of, like, what I do is about the enthusiasm that I have for the material that I talk about.
And no one else, I mean, this is the thing, at the end of the day, there aren't that many ancient historians or archaeologists doing this effectively. There's a whole tranche of modern historians talking about very pertinent recent history issues,
Yeah.
and then there are the history bros doing their let's look at Wikipedia and talk about something for a minute.
Yeah.
But there are, in terms of actual academic historians, a lot of modern history, very little medieval history and ancient history, I feel, and archaeology likewise. There's people doing the debunking. There's people, but there's a small market, and you've already got your niche. So in the hypothetical world where another 100 classicists start pouring out content like this, you're still going to have integrity because you're doing your thing. I feel that's what I like to reflect on. Yes, I'm doing a few general videos like what happened but I'm not doing this GCSE level content or debunking the ancient aliens fanatics. There's still a, and the other thing I find, I don't know if you do this at all, but I embed a lot of my TikToks now in my WordPress blog, because if I'm going to a site, I'm doing a report, I can actually just drop in the videos, so that because WordPress allows that now. So I'm finding that's one of my other rationales for doing it, is that it's another video enhancement of my existing content that I've been doing for 9.5 years on. But I think slow and steady, or rapid, is the way forward, and see what happens, really. But at the end of the day, without any commitment to us doing this in terms of professional involvement, I think the end of the day it has to be would take what comes, rather than an obligation to continue doing these things. That's my feeling about it. I don't know about how you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are things that I think, this might be, I sort of briefly think that when I'm in Athens in April, I'll film some stuff and not post it until kind of July, August, around when the Pan Athenea would have been, and like that sort of stuff. But I just, also my brain just doesn't work in a way that can plan too far in advance, or make content that I'm not immediately enthusiastic about making.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's planning, but not too much planning.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think I've covered all of the things I really wanted to ask you about. The positive, the strategies, the positive, the negative, the plans of the future. I mean, is there anything else you'd like to discuss before we hand over to Q&A and see if there's anyone's got any questions for you, or me, or us?
I don't think so. I think we've pretty well covered a lot of things. I think one more thing that we haven't talked a lot about is the community of fellow creators that there is amongst archaeologists, ancient historians, modern historians, and that I think has been very valuable to me. Not just because sometimes when you're having an issue with TikTok itself or with making content, it's easy to just throw up a friends only video to mutuals to say, are your views also trash at the moment? And so, yeah, I do really value the community of content creators within sort of broadly history and archaeology that I have managed to kind of, find.
And I found that really valuable, because there's people there that I'm sure on other social media platforms I wouldn't be interested in their content, but the style of content, I'm a consumer of this. Again, I'm using these words, product and consumer. Anyway, yeah. I am a listener. I'm on TikTok watching and learning a lot. Yeah. I've learned a lot of educational content, but also individuals that from different regions of the world, different ethnic backgrounds, genders, identities that I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with on other social media platforms. I am aware that there are student creators on there, and some very good ones, and I try to not be on their in their comments or anything, leave them space to do their thing. Yeah. And I'm aware of that, but even there's a lot of mutual respect and camaraderie, and technical issues that I wouldn't have other. Are you finding that a lot of people are saying this hard right talking point? Where's that coming? Oh yeah, that's a standard point, and that's from QAnon, and I don't know a lot of that, so I get a lot of help knowing why people are using these silly rhetorical tactics, you know.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think that's really, really important. And yeah, there's not enough of us, but there is a substantial number of people doing really exciting things. I'm learning a heck of a lot about, you know, ancient the ancient Mediterranean, for example. But not only just that, you know, lots of other things as well.
Yeah.
It's a new world. You never stop learning, even at my age. You know?
Indeed.
It's good. Okay, shall we? Well, thank you for this. I think it's really helpful because I haven't talked to any other TikTok creators in this kind of formal setting before, and I certainly think it's helped me to articulate a few things that, and I've learned a lot about your perspective. So, I mean, shall we see if there's anyone got any questions for us?
Sure.
I'm going to stop the recording now, but I should say formally, thank you so much, Ellie, for this conversation. And you know, I think it's going to be an important addition to thinking about how we move forward across the humanities in terms of our public engagement. So I think TikTok is at least one of the things more people should be considering as part of their digital presence. So thank you very much. But I'll just
Sadly, we're all going to die. But while you're waiting, why not follow Archaeodeath? Subscribe now on YouTube.